J'invite Magdalena Wichtowska, qui est doctorante au Polish Institute of World Art Studies. Sinon, elle est traductrice et interprète, historienne de l'art, dont les recherches se basent sur les échanges artistiques entre la Pologne et la Grande-Bretagne.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great pleasure to be here. I'm very happy. I'm going to talk about a male weaver for a change, since today's conference and generally the textile environment is dominated by female weavers, which I'm very happy about. But today I'm going to tell you something about a male perspective. So Tadek Beutlich was a textile and graphic artist as well as a teacher. He was renowned for his large-scale woven construction, tapestries and prints. His works are held in the collections of the Victoria Albert Museum and Tate in London. In 1993, he was awarded an MBE for his contribution to the arts. In the United Kingdom, he is regarded as one of the most outstanding textile artists of the 20th century. Yet, sadly, he remains almost unknown in Poland, even though that is where his story began. The purpose of my presentation is to show you that Beutlich's artistic identity was shaped by the experience of living in the in-between, between cultures, languages, countries, and media. Referring to Homi Bhabha's concept of the third space of enunciation, I aim to explore how Beutlich's art gave rise to a new hybrid identity of an artist who never fully belonged to any of the world. Although Bhabha's theory concerns mainly colonial relationships, it proves to be universal, applicable to any artist living on the border of cultures. So let us therefore begin when the sense of the in-betweenness first emerged. Beutlich was born in 1922 in Lwówek, a small town near Poznań in Poland, situated almost on the former Polish-German border. From the very childhood, he was shaped by the borderland, geographically, linguistically, and through his family background. He grew up in a family of Polish-German descent, where religion often defined one's sense of belonging much more strongly than nationality itself. Lwówek, as he recalled, was a small but colorful place. He had strong memories of the vividly painted church, the clouds drifting over the meadows, and the altar of Wit Stworz in Krakow that captivated him on a school trip. These early encounters with nature and light would later re-emerge in his work, in the rhythm of fibers, in organic morphologies, and in his inquiry into how meaning may be constructed from the most elemental forms. At the age of 8, Tadek and his family were compelled to relocate to the big city, Poznań, an event that initiated a lifelong trajectory of displacement. His sense of identity grew more complex when, at the age of 11, his father told him that he was not quite like his schoolmates, meaning that he was not fully Polish. The extent to which this revelation affected him remains uncertain, yet its impact was evidently profound. He recalled this moment 6 decades later in an interview. Shortly before his 15th birthday, he decided to become an artist and enrolled in a 2-year course at the State School of Decorative Arts and Artistic Industry in Poznań. There, as he said, his life began. The school integrated artistic instruction with craft training. Students engaged in ceramics, printmaking, textiles, stained glass, and sculpture. The director often repeated, "Don't think, just do," encouraging action, work with materials, and most of all, trust in one's hands more than in reason. Students were treated with great respect, and the openness and practical spirit of the school left a lasting mark on Beutlich. The belief that form arises from process would stay with him forever. This formative period was abruptly disrupted by the outbreak of war. Fearing that the son might be conscripted, his family sent him to school in Weimar. There he found himself amid growing nationalism. He spoke little German, and his Polish origins elicited distrust. So he experienced himself as an outsider. From Weimar, he moved to the Academy of Fine Arts in Dresden, where he found, as he later recalled, greater artistic freedom. Yet even from there, he was soon expelled, after it was discovered that he was not a pure German. After numerous attempts to prove his German descent in order to be readmitted to the school, Beutlich was ultimately conscripted into the German army and sent to the Russian front, becoming part of the theater of the Second World War. It was, as he himself described, the worst period of his life. The experience of war cut him off from his German identity forever. Beutlich never spoke about his time in the German army. Even the closest members of his family that I managed to contact confirmed that the artist never discussed this topic. It's also telling that he never wished to return to Germany after the war. He went there only twice and only for very important family reasons. The German army surrendered in May 1945, and after the war he joined the 2nd Polish Corps in Italy, where he could resume artistic practice and reinsert himself into creative milieu. It was a moment of relief, yet simultaneously another chapter in his ongoing displacement. Beutlich entered adulthood belonging to no place. National identity, to which he had scarcely given thought before the war, now became a burden. This experience of constant shifting of boundaries, geographical, cultural, and personal, would become the central axis of his entire art. After 10 wonderful months in Italy, this period of study came to an end when the 2nd Corps moved to Great Britain. After spending time in British camps, where artistic activity among the soldiers continued to some extent, and following prolonged efforts by the Polish authorities, Beutlich and other students were eventually admitted to Sir John Cass Institute of Art and Design. At that moment, his future became, in a sense, sealed with settling in England. After years of upheaval and uncertainty, the country seemed to him a haven of stability, and Beutlich decided to remain there. After the war, he became enthralled by the artistic life in England and practically lived in galleries. In 1947, a breakthrough moment came when he saw an exhibition of French tapestries at the Victoria and Albert Museum, prepared by the artist and weaver Jean Louxat. Tadek recalled spending every afternoon there, watching for hours as artists wove live before the audience. It was the first exhibition that had such a profound impact on him. This fascination quickly turned into a drive to act. Inspired, he bought some darning yarn and began to weave his first pieces of his own, without a loom, without any formal training. This spontaneous decision opened a new chapter in his life. Painting gave way to textiles. That same year, he decided to study in the textile department at the Camberwell School of Art in London. He did so well that after completing his studies, the school offered him a teaching position in textiles, and he went on to teach there for the next 24 years. From the outset of his artistic career, Beutlich was shaped by two parallel forces. The first was his heritage, the upbringing and education in Poland, and the enduring emotional and sentimental ties to his homeland. The second was the British milieu in which he lived and worked. These influences intertwined and mutually enriched one another, and Beutlich assimilated them with his practice, drawing upon both experiences. The early period of Beutlich's work in the United Kingdom was pretty traditional. He created flat wool or cotton tapestries using a limited color palette, as he, like everyone else in the post-war period, was forced to work with very few available colors. Yet these imposed limitations were only apparent. They'd help him focus on form and on expressing his ideas in a simple but effective way. His early works from the 1950s reveal clear inspiration from Poland, especially from his childhood close to nature and from traditional Polish folk motifs found in Cepelia-style textiles. There are also formal and thematic similarities to the works of artists associated with the Polish school of textile that we have been discussing today a lot of that period. Animals, particularly birds and insects, are frequent elements of his early works from the 50s. He consistently followed the principle, don't think, just do. And it seems that these motifs emerged from the depths of memory of his happy early years spent in Poland. However, Beutlich approached the theme of folk art, much like Polish textile artists of that time, in a modern, graphic manner. The artist simultaneously experimented with other means of expression, namely printmaking. During this time, he did not confine himself to a single medium. In fact, from the outset of his textile explorations, he was also investigating the possibilities of printmaking. Early in his career, it was his prints that enjoyed greater popularity among collectors. His works also received awards in competitions. In this medium, too, one can observe inspiration drawn from nature, whose motifs are created using a more diverse and vivid color palette. However, in both techniques, the artist retained his graphic and minimalistic style. In terms of identity, Beutlich likely found it difficult to feel at home in England. He completed his studies there, began teaching, married an English woman, and had a son. He had therefore developed professional and personal ties. It seems that everything necessary to settle down there, yet he never quite did. The 1960s marked the period when his art truly matured, as this decade brought Beutlich a time of intense development and a breakthrough in his approach to textile art. The art world was undergoing major transformations. The concept of fiber art was emerging, and textile began to move beyond the boundaries of mere decoration. At the same time, the modern Polish school of textile was born in Europe. In 1962, during the first International Biennale of Tapestry in Lausanne, Polish artists achieved a spectacular success by presenting three-dimensional sculpture forms. Beutlich himself presented twice at the Biennale in 1967 and I think 2 years later in 1969. And although living in exile, Beutlich evolved in the same spirit. He was profoundly impressed by the exhibition Modern American Wall Hangings, again at the Victoria and Albert Museum, which made him realize that textile could be not only an image, but also space. This is the moment when the artist fully embodies Barber's concept of the third space. His textiles are quite literally spaces of negotiation between East and West, craft and high art. Fascinated by new possibilities, he began experimenting with open weave and unconventional materials, such as sisal, jute, horsehair, and even pieces of wood or foil. He improvised. He often used found materials, whatever he had at hand. He even used X-ray screens from hospitals because he had a friend nurse that provided him with unwanted X-ray materials. He created intuitively in the spirit of the words he had once heard at the art school in Poznań. Don't think, just do. And it was during this period that his most recognizable works were created. Monumental organic hangings such as Archangel and Bird of Prey. At that time, Beutlich purchased a house and a weaving studio in Ditchling, England. The spacious interiors allowed him to create works of impressive size, often exceeding 5 square meters. Monumental, yet lightweight, these works evoked both unease and admiration at once. Beutlich's works never lost their organic quality. His massive creations seemed to grow like elements of nature, untamed and towering over the viewer. A distinctly Eastern European sensibility is evident in them, one that Beutlich shared with other artists of the Polish school of textile, such as Magdalena Abakanowicz and Wojciech Sadley. These artists also found beauty in restrained and subdued colors, creating tension through form and scale. The similarities are not merely formal. They lie also in the approach, in the very way of thinking about and treating the textile and the artwork itself. After 11 years in England, Beutlich made a rather sudden decision to move to Spain for a change. A decision driven by his desire to escape the consequences of his artistic success. He had been forced to employ around a dozen people to weave the large-scale pieces he designed, and as a result, he was weaving less and less with his own hands. That was very important to him throughout his career. His art was becoming increasingly popular. More and more people surrounded him, visited him, and this began to feel overwhelming. Spain became his refuge and an opportunity to return to pure craftsmanship. There he found everything he wanted. He worked in complete isolation in a small Spanish village, discovered a new country, and explored new materials, once again dictated by local availability and budget. As in the past, limitations stimulated Beutlich's creativity. He experimented with local materials, creating organic plant-like forms from esparto grass that resembled roots, seeds, and fungi. He would tie a tuft of cotton wool to the end of a blade of grass with very fine sisal, dip it into PVA glue, and press it into a desired shape, or wrap cotton around the tip of the grass, bend it, and bind it with sisal. At that time, he abandoned monumental works, which was a pretty practical decision due to the lack of weaving equipment that he left in England and limited studio space, but also a natural need to create something entirely different from his previous work. He later recalled that he often needed to change something in his practice. He would get bored quickly, so after the large-scale pieces came the time for small, even miniature ones. What remained unchanged, however, was the organic character of his art, focus on nature and its processes. Far from the artistic circles of Britain, hidden in his solitude, Beutlich could freely shape, create, and construct his next organic works. They revealed Beutlich's highly individual voice, as well as his mastery of technique and materials. In his works, the artist managed to capture movement and the vibration of colors. Once again, he invented entirely new methods of creation, further expanding the definition of weaving. He continued working with these techniques for years to come, upon returning to the United Kingdom, since, surprise, surprise, in the 1980s, Beutlich returned to England with his family. As you see, he's an adventurer and a traveler, a really, really big one. They settled in small seaside towns far from the metropolis. He admitted that Spain had given him peace, but he once again felt the need for contact with people, with his students, with exhibitions. He had plenty of material, sisal, jute, wool, PVA, and continued to use them, creating tangles of short, narrow, vividly colored sprouts. From these, he shaped colorful three-dimensional plant forms, insects, and other natural phenomena, such as the sun. The techniques he used evolved regularly, yet Beutlich consistently returned to nature. It remained his source of meaning and inspiration. In the 1990s, Beutlich began to explore yet another theme, the human figure. This was also the first moment in his artistic life where nature was no longer the central focus of his work. He used aspartagrass, creating loops that he coiled together to form the shape of a head, then wove by wrapping to create legs and arms. These works can be regarded as small sculptures, though they still retained a woven element there. Beutlich bound the figures together with sisal, just as he had done in Spain. At first he created single figures, but soon he began adding more, weaving them together into small groups, which gradually grew in number. Beutlich started to create so-called crowds, which in the early phase of this period were colorful and rather joyful. However, he quickly moved on to works of a different tone, depicting people sitting in circles, looking upward, holding hands in apprehension. These figures have emaciated, twisted bodies. Their groups conjure a sense of unease and indeterminacy, their faces registering astonishment, fear, and suffering. Critics compare these spatial sculptures to the works of Goya and Bosch, whom Beutlich admired and who also masterfully portrayed so-called collective helplessness. The artist poignantly conveys human vulnerability, both as an individual and as part of a collective. Later, in the 1990s, Beutlich abandoned textile art and returned to drawing. He obsessively sketched dozens of human faces, sullen, terrified, with empty gazes. He often combined organic motifs with their human body. Heads sprouting roots, hands turning into branches, figures consumed by their own shadows. These final works are his quietest yet most personal commentary of his life. The artist, who had spent his entire life in between, finally found the language to speak about it directly, not with words, but with the full weight of experience. Tadeusz Beutlich's art is an extraordinary story about being in between, about a life woven from displacements, about an identity formed at the meeting point of worlds. Each stage of his biography brings a new material, a new weave of meanings. Beutlich created within the space that Homi Bhabha called the third, between cultures, languages, and traditions. It was there in this in-between that he found true freedom. His works are not only pieces of art, but also maps of the inner world of the artist, who never ceased to ask, "Who am I?" His legacy stands not only as a testament to artistic courage, but also as a lesson, how to transform the in-between into a creative space. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation de cette œuvre méconnue, j'ai l'impression, à redécouvrir.